not in the same field. Actually, welcome again. Those of us that are joining us tonight, I'm here with my esteemed colleague, not in the same field. Dr. Williams actually is in the medical field. She's a DO. I'm in more of the theological field. And we are here tonight to discuss such a nice, sensitive topic. We have had, I think, 2 or 3 episodes on it, the topic of forgiveness. And tonight we're going to go a little bit deeper. We're going to talk about something that the result of some of these infliction that we've had as individual people not forgiven, are we not forgiven? And so we have entitled the subtitle to this topic tonight, Dr. Williams, spiritual trauma. And what is actually spiritual trauma? And with that, I'm going to have you say a few words, and we're going to be very interactive as usual. We're asking for the participants that are online to please give your questions. But Real Talk with Dr. White, we're trying to address sensitive topic. We're not here to condemn anyone. We're not here to point any fingers. We're just here to discuss topics that sometimes may be a little bit taboo, to have an open discussion and dialogue with. And we're hoping that we can go together on this journey. So Dr. Williams, thanks again for tonight as coming into this wonderful topic.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. White. All right. So we have been talking about forgiveness and what that means. And we've kind of talked about forgiveness, reconciliation, and we've talked about restoration.
Yes.
And redemption. But today we're going to talk a little bit about spiritual trauma, because this is an area that I think we need to shed more light on. And I always think about the goal of what we're doing, right, is to develop and build a healthy community and to foster well-being, not just physical well-being, but also spiritual well-being,
Sure.
right? We're talking to church folks and those that are interested in wanting to be church folks, right? But we're talking about just building a healthy community and a healthy life overall. So spiritual trauma is something that has happened to a lot of people. And I would venture to say, I don't know what the numbers are because I didn't look into it, but I would venture to say that majority of people have experienced spiritual trauma at some point. So I love how you have defined spiritual trauma. And
thank you.
I love, I just want a little, I don't know if people know this, but, you do have a lot of experience in this area, especially as it pertains to stewardship. And we'll talk a little bit about the link between spiritual trauma and stewardship, because I love the way you tied the two. But you do have a manuscript and a book that's going to be coming out. I don't know if I'm supposed to be saying this, but
yeah, that's okay. You're safe enough to say that. Yeah, I do have a book that's coming out.
Yes.
And I guess a couple of months. It's in the review stage, and it is entitled Spiritual Trauma, when the church wounds the people it was actually built to heal. And so that is it. So I won't go into detail, but I thank you for mentioning it. We will, when it comes out, we will definitely advertise it on this topic, but it's something that is dear to my heart, Dr. Williams. I have experienced it myself. I've seen many individuals experience it, being in position as a pastor, prior to that, an elders, church director, finance person, the finance committee, treasurer, you name it. So I've seen a lot of these, but thank you very much for mentioning that. Absolutely. And so spiritual trauma, what is it? Sorry, what is spiritual trauma? Well, what I've defined it to be, Dr. Williams, is spiritual trauma occurs when it's inflict in the very space that was promised to heal. And here we're talking about the church. It is a wound that comes from the world, yes, but from the household of faith, which is, again, the church. For many, this wound, believers that are in the church, and the deepest pain that is not suffering and occurred. And the sad thing about it, it occurs with people who should be there to uphold the principles of the church.
Absolutely.
And so the individuals get a traumatic experience, I would say. And the reason why I put spiritual beside it, in front of it, because folks interpret it as it's a church that did it, or it's God that did it. And in reality, God may have nothing to do with the behavior of someone. And so that's kind of where I've packaged this whole concept of spiritual trauma.
So spiritual trauma is when the church wounds the people it was meant to actually heal. Well, in the medical space, trauma outside of the church is no different than trauma within the church, right? Um,
Wow.
and when you look at trauma, if you were to actually define trauma, and I don't want to, mess this up.
Please do. No, no, no. Let's go into the medical definition, please.
Because it's important to understand that the impact that trauma has is very far reaching and can cause a lot of physical,
So,
not just.
Doc, before you go any further, could you define for those of us that that may not know what trauma is?
Mhm.
Could you do that for me from a medical standpoint, please?
Yeah, so trauma is basically emotional or a physical response to an event that is deeply distressing. And
Wow.
that's not my definition. That's just a broad definition. You can go on Google and you can
Great.
look it up, right?
Right.
But when we have what we call acute trauma, we have chronic trauma. And when I
Okay.
think of acute and chronic in the mental health space, I also often think about acute or chronic pain, right?
Hmm.
So when you have acute pain, that's acute pain, that happens and it usually resolves. It's something that happens, you deal with the issue and then the pain resolves. But if that issue isn't dealt with, then
Dealt
that
with, yeah.
pain becomes chronic.
Right.
It's no different than in the sphere of trauma. When you
Right.
have an acute trauma, it's oftentimes a single event that will cause this kind of distress to
Right.
the individual, and it oftentimes will threaten your sense of security and your sense of safety.
Yeah.
And of course, acute trauma can be very distressing, but it's when that acute trauma is not dealt with, or you keep having a re-injuring.
Okay, so let's deal with the dealt with, and I think that is a piece that came out for me in the book that I'm writing, because we are human beings and we hurt each other sometimes intentionally and unintentionally. But the question for me was, is the church prepared to deal with that hurt? How do they manage that hurt? Is there a system? And because I've been doing stewardship now for 3.5 decades, I actually married it to the concept of stewardship. Are we stewarding this trauma appropriately? And it's not an emotional management or how a person feels or how the church feels or the leadership feels. We need to have a system in which to deal with this trauma. And I'm quite sure in the medical world, there is a system to deal with different levels of trauma. And so my question came out to, what are the system? What is the stewardness or the stewarding of traumas that is inflicted on individual in the church? And so I'm kind of happy that you mentioned the whole concept of how, the dealing with it, have something, there's a medical approach to it. So please go on with the medical concept, because I think that is key for our audience to understand and how we build on this spiritual trauma.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this idea of acute and chronic. So we're talking about people that have been re-injured and now they have this chronic trauma situation, or they have been deeply impacted. And it actually does have a profound impact or a profound effect on your body. And that can lead to a lot of the negative consequences, whether it's withdrawing, whether it is, emotional dysregulation. All of the things that you would see in trauma applies to spiritual trauma. And so we need to be careful not to separate the two. This is an issue that is happening, and it's happening in the church. And the negative consequences are no different than if it were to happen outside of the church. I do. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so don't need to cut you. So therefore, folks will intend, when an individual gets in a traumatic situation, one of the vehicles that we use, that may be used, is blaming.
Yeah.
Blame themselves, blaming others. And in the church, unfortunately, what I've seen, folks have blamed God.
Right.
And by blaming God, they take the position to invalidate God. And so you have people going around, oh, there's no God, because if there was a God, this would not happen to me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, where did that God even come into this situation?
Well, that is the damages that spiritual harm can cause to individuals, right? You start to draw conclusions that are just not true, right? Because that's just what happens when you are traumatized. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Can I just make a point? Because one of the things that I really love that you did was you tied this concept of spiritual trauma to stewardship. In fact, one of the things you said that I really love was that spiritual trauma starts where stewardship ends.
Yes.
And I think we need to then define what stewardship is, right? Because how are we going to understand that if we don't know what stewardship is? And so stewardship essentially is defined, according to, Merriam-Webster dictionary, is defined as the careful and responsible, management of something entrusted to one's care.
Yes.
essentially a manager. That's basically what
Exactly.
a
Exactly.
steward is a
Yeah.
manager, right?
And from a theological standpoint, Doc, it means that Adam, when God created let's just say the resources around him, we know Adam was God actually entrusted Adam with
To
those.
do.
So
That's
Adam
right.
was our first steward.
That's it. That's it.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when we talk about spiritual trauma, we need to understand that people who have been hurt and now have the spiritual trauma is because you have people who have failed in their duty to be
Yes.
adequate stewards.
Stewards. Exactly.
Right.
And so it has to be something that is pre-designed how to first, when it happens, no, not when it, avoiding it to happen.
Yeah.
As God told Adam and Eve, do not touch a tree, that particular tree in the midst of the garden. God had an avoidance statement, but they did after that. But after that, even when it happens, how do we manage that?
How do we manage that?
Right.
Well, well, one of the things we need to talk about first, though, in order to be able to manage it, we need to understand how the spiritual trauma is inflicted first, right? And oftentimes, it usually looks like emotional neglect. It looks like financial exploitation, right? Absence of protection,
right?
Manipulation, spiritual manipulation.
Yep.
Can also can cause spiritual trauma, and then abuse of power, abuse of authority. Those are some of the ways that spiritual trauma can be inflicted on individuals. And usually these individuals often find themselves in very vulnerable positions. They're often either grieving, whether it's a loss of a loved one or whether it's loss of health.
I'm going to even loss of job. Recently, as you're talking, my mind went back to someone that spoke to me 2 months ago. And then I've known this individual maybe 20, 30 years. And she said, she was born in the church and she returned her faithful tithes and offering. And she lost her job, kids, a devastated situation. And she came to the church for some temporary help, not only financial. And she said the intrusion into her life, and it was exposed from the board level and leaders and asking her to do certain things. And she did it under the embarrassment because she needed the help so badly. But in the end, they didn't do anything. And you could see the hurt. She was now attending another local church, obviously. But you could see the hurt. And her words were repeated over and over. She said, I gave money, I returned my tithe faithful for years. And so how do you actually, I was so speechless, for lack of a better word. And I'm not, please folks don't think I'm thinking that the church is a bank that people should run for money.
No, not at all.
That's not the point I'm getting. and I'm not even talking about this little 2-cent penny poor fund that we have in our church, some of our churches. We drop the little $20 after in a communion to think we're doing the world a favor. Okay. I'm talking about having structural help, not only financially, but working with this person throughout that temporary setback. And they're doing well right now. She's doing well. So you've lost not only that committed steward in returning tithes and other things, but you have traumatized that individual. And that I just gave us as an example, because these are things that, again, as a church, how do we steward these things before and after?
And I don't really want to make this too personal, but you kind of have to.
Right. That's fine. I'll be personal myself.
And so, I thank God that I've, grown past this. And I thank God I've kind of worked through this. But, I feel like that is neglect is such, when there is silence, when you expect the church to rally around you and to support you in your time of need, and they're not there, it is a very deep wound. And I love what you said. You said the wound is not, it goes beyond just the physical. Oh, how did you say it? I wrote it down here somewhere. That's what you said. You said oftentimes, you got it?
Go ahead, please.
You said spiritual trauma creates deep wounds, oftentimes more impactful than physical wounds because they strike the soul.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's that kind of wound that is so deep because the soul is involved. And,
Right.
you know, like you say, you start to ask yourself questions. Well, I was so faithful. I showed up, I was always there to help others. And in my state of need, there was just silence,
Yep. Yep.
and it did cause me to withdraw. I withdrew for a few years,
Yes.
until I was able to work through that and, came out on the other side. Thank God for that. Praise God. But a lot of people don't,
Yeah. A
they
lot of
stay
folks.
isolated because
Yep.
that's another consequence
Yep.
of spiritual trauma, is that people will retreat because that's the only way that they can protect their sanity. So there's
Exactly.
nothing wrong with retreating, but then
No. No.
that
No.
retreat can turn into isolation,
Yeah.
and it can be
Well,
damaging.
I'll say, Doc. Since we're sharing a little bit about personal, and I'll be personal. I'm
Mm,
don't really have effect on me yet because
it
I'm
is what
open.
it is. Yes. No, we have to be
But,
personal.
but I never grew up in the church like her. I
Yeah.
came to the church in my mid-20s, late 20s,
Mhm.
and I'm a street boy. I know the streets. I've been to someone else's religion, and we have code of ethics in the street. You don't rat out on someone. You be loyal if you're a friend. You hang together. Those type of, and that's what I grew up in. Okay, and so we hurt one another on the street, but hey, it's expected because hey, that's a boy from the other community. If it hurts you, hey, that's the way it rolls. But for me, when I came to the church, I came with this bright hide and ponytail approach as if it's not here. And when it happened to me, oh my, crying out loud, I was lost because I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
You did it in the name of God. You did it in a safe environment. And it was done by folks who I didn't expect it from.
Yeah.
And you're right. The fallout now is like, I became like a push-up,
It's like,
boys and girls, so that part took a while for me to kind of simmer. And I checked God. I'm be honest with you. I had to check him.
Me too. Me
I'm
too.
like, hey, and the comforting thing with spiritual trauma is that I've realized that trauma does not invalidate God's calling on you. It does not revoke his covenant from you.
Amen.
It does not make you spiritual and equal, or it's a gift, and the call of God that is irrevocable. And Romans 11:29 talks about that. So for those of us that may be suffering, I want to give you a little theological and biblical foundation. Please do not remove God out of it. You need God to make that journey.
Absolutely.
You need him to. So please hang on to him. And sometimes you have to walk away from some of these church folks too.
That's it. I mean, just it is what it is. Like we keep talking about forgiveness. Part of healing and recovery might mean that you may not be able to reconcile with the church, with that specific congregation may not be possible because you might be re-injuring yourself. But that does not mean that God doesn't love you, and it doesn't mean that you've lost your faith either, right?
Exactly. It's God has given the responsibility, entrusted his people with some sacred responsibility, and these are, for instance, trust, power, care, and of the soul, and we mentioned that earlier. And when that is violated, it's very hurtful. But God, again, doesn't leave us there. He takes us through that spiritual trauma. It might be a minor or a great offense, but God works with us. As a matter of fact, God breathes us into that. And so that's kind of for lack of a better, one of the first takeaway with this spiritual concept. But Doc, I don't want to interrupt. I was very happy you were marrying this to the medical field. So please go on, please.
No, absolutely. One of the things I wanted to read a few things that I gleaned from just my discussion with you. And I want to, because sometimes it's really hard to put words to how you feel. That's kind of the manipulation of spiritual trauma. Just like in the regular world out there in the medical space, when someone has been traumatized, let's say someone goes through like domestic violence or, kind of abuse.
And it's like that.
I was getting ready to say, there's some correlation there. You know what I'm saying? There's some correlation there. But there is this, what's the word I'm looking for? Where you feel sort of, like you said, you feel a bit there's a guilt that comes over you,
Mm-hmm.
which is misplaced. You shouldn't feel guilty for, for what happened to you, but it can happen that way. And you retreat, and you end up not really being able to deal with the issue. So I feel like, putting words to some of what people have gone
Pain.
through,
Yes.
some of the pain that people have experienced, will help to kind of give light, and it will free them from feeling so guilty. And or for me, I know one of the things that I thank God, I believe God has given me the spirit of discernment. Sorry, I'm talking in circles, but I feel like God has given me the spirit of discernment. And sometimes when I'm speaking to my husband, I'm like, I can't find the words, but like, I'm like that,
That
and
right.
you know what I mean? And I think a lot of people probably go through that. It's like, I can't put my finger on it, but this happened, and this happened to me, and it's not right. But I can't, if I go and I try to tell somebody that this happened to me, I may not be able to put the right words to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and for me, and I've had several in my encounter as a Christian, but for me, what the devastating one was that until I met someone that went through something similar,
Yes.
and we were just like meeting at
Like,
it was like, oh, really? Oh, and
oh,
so yeah, and so that it became a healing session, not a bashing
yeah,
session.
not a bashing session.
No, it's a
Yeah.
healing session. So, oh, that's how you felt. Oh, that's how
And
I
I'm not
felt.
crazy. I wasn't crazy for thinking this. I wasn't
Exactly.
crazy. I was like, I
Exactly.
know it happened, like, but
Right.
yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah. So
I found that to be helpful. And I'm not saying going out
mhm,
there searching for this person, because some people really don't understand. God, I think God will lead you to that connection, because you may
absolutely.
say to some folks, and they take it as you are trying to be exalt yourself or proud, or you're better than the person. And you're
Oh,
like,
yes.
I'm not, I'm sorry to be
So
a little
far
parochial.
from,
I'm
yeah,
sorry
like,
for being a little parochial, but you talking about that? I'm talking about, I didn't expected this. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. And I'm trying to deal with this trauma that I'm going through right now. And
yeah,
so, yeah, folks, it doesn't make any sense talking to them about that particular hurt. And
yeah.
then you have the churchy ones, everything they spiritualize. They're in heaven right now. Their thoughts are in heaven. Their mind is, they're levitating when you're talking to them. And then you're trying to say something like as simple as bread, butter, and jam. Like, yeah, Moses had manna in heaven. I'm like, okay.
Lord help us. Yeah, they're not on planet Earth.
Our
That's what I
body
say.
came
You
from
come
heaven
back to
down to
planet Earth.
Moses.
You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
like,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, you're not on planet Earth.
So, yeah,
Okay.
you have them. So again, you have to be very careful, but that's my point.
Yes,
You can
yes,
really understand. Go ahead, Doc.
absolutely. But some of the things that I wanted to kind of just put out there, I love what you said. Authority does not mean domination.
Right.
Authority actually means service, being a
Amen. Yep.
servant.
Servant. Yep. Yep.
And truth should produce healing, not
Yes.
wounds. So
Right.
these are some of the things when you start to think about this, when you think about what's going on with you as it pertains to spiritual trauma, if what you're saying is based on truth,
Mm-hmm.
then you should not. We'll talk about how to heal from spiritual trauma, or at least the first steps in healing is to be able to name that thing, right?
Yes.
And it's
Yes.
based
Yeah.
on truth, right? So if
Right.
you know you're standing on the side of truth, then right then and there, you're safe, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
truth oftentimes produces wounds, and it shouldn't. It should be healing. It
It
shouldn't
should be healing.
cause
Well,
wounds.
you'll find folks will say, "Well, I'm telling you the truth. I'm the leader here. I'm the boss here," and they just think they need to abuse the truth to a point to hurt you. I don't think Christ ever did that in his journey on earth.
Yeah, well, that's abuse of authority and power, like we
That is
talked
a beautiful. When someone looks at you and say, I can fire you.
about.
I know that.
Yeah, yeah.
You really don't have to tell me that. I know that.
Right.
So by the mere fact you saying that, you're abusing your authority.
That is abuse of authority. Absolutely. Absolutely. Another thing that I love what you said, what does it say? What you say? Institutions instead of people. Institutions instead of people are protected, but that's really not God's way.
That's
So
not
we're
good.
not supposed to be protecting
Yeah.
an establishment. It's
No.
wonderful to have an organization. It's
Yes.
wonderful to have institutions. They bring some order to things,
Yes.
and they allow for
Yes.
efficiency and all that
Yes.
good stuff, but they are not supposed to take the place of
Yes.
people.
Well, I've been in administration now for most of my life. I've 40 something years of experience in the business world, and I've been head of administration and so forth. And I would say to folks, administration, although we have structures and processes to move the company along. And when I speak about administration, I talk about the HR division, I talk about the financial division, the management division, you know. There's always room within that environment to work with a particular situation.
Yes. Yes.
It's not a cookie cutter. Yeah, we have system, but it's not a cookie cutter. And you will find leaders within that environment that takes the cookie cutter approach will not last very long. The corporate world will spit them out. The challenge that we have, however, in the church, that others will see the behavior and they either be afraid to address it because the retaliation, they don't call it out, they sugarcoat it with the icing of Jesus Christ. You know, the cake is there, that is not a good cake, but you cover it up with Jesus Christ or some spirituality. And you do not speak out because of fear of reprisal. And so that's where this infestation happens within the church on the name of God. And so, again, if someone does something to me that's in the world, I'm expecting that.
Yes. I'm not expecting that in the church.
I'm not expecting. And that's where the spiritual trauma hurts more. So I just want to bring that point out in tonight's presentation. It hurts more because you're supposed to be representing the very place the person is seeking safety. And you're telling them, I'm the boss. Or you're telling them, oh, you know, this is the way our organization does it, so we have to go by the book. That is a hurt. When a person sometimes is not saying to you that they're not saying, I do not want you to bend the laws. That's not what I'm asking you for. I'm really just asking you for a listening ear and how we can work through the process. And that is a system that I'm talking about.
Yes.
We have that system.
Oh, you said the word infestation, and so many things came to mind. It truly is an infestation, because also what I've seen is that because a lot of other people are walking around with this kind of trauma, they traumatize other people.
Oh, Dr. Williams, why are you coming up with a second topic tonight?
Sorry. Okay. Well,
no, but we could make that episode number 5 or 6, right?
Okay.
Yes. What's the saying? Hurt people?
Hurt people?
Hurt people.
Yeah. I'm reminded of Matthew 18:6. Whoever shall cause one of the little ones of these who believe in me to stumble, it would be better for them or for him if a millstone were hung around his neck. And this little people is not talking about children; it's talking about believers.
People,
people, you know. So it really is God. God does not. He doesn't play with spiritual trauma. That's what I take from that. It's a very serious thing, because
it's as if we know better, we should do better.
Yes, absolutely.
From a spiritual context, and the other thing to Doc, spiritual trauma rarely announces itself. It's not loud. You know, I reflect on a situation and of a young lady. I sat for almost 4 or 5 hours thinking about her trauma, and the very leader of the church was molesting her, and he's up there talking that Sabbath, and then ask her to sing for him. And she said, man, I can't remember the exact words she used, but I sat there, my heart cried. Tears could not come to my heart. I said, you have already abused this young lady. You've been doing it for years. She's a 10-year, and then
it's a re-injuring. You're just re-injuring her.
You literally call her up on that Sabbath that you just messed around, and have your wife and your kids, and ask her to sing for you. Now, that might be a more devastated one versus a simple one, as because you had a misunderstanding with a particular member. You are now coming to church or following there, or your kids had a misunderstanding. This is a great one. Your kids had a little, and normally used to say to me, good morning on the day you go to church. You know, for us, I think nobody know we go to church on Sabbath, so I'll say happy Sabbath, or they might use Sabbath for a Sunday, whoever. But then you don't respond, and you usually respond all the other days. And then the person asks you, so, you know, hey, what's going on? Nothing.
I tell you,
Go ahead, sister. Doctor.
I'm not gonna say nothing because I cannot stand that. It's so disingenuous to me. Like, I hate when people do that when you're trying to, because for me, one of the things that I have really worked very hard on
Right.
is whatever space I come into, I want to be able to have a free mind, right? So I'm not somebody that can hold on to like stuff, like, oh, this person doesn't like me. So then when I walk into a space, I'm gonna act like I didn't see you because I don't say hi. I can't, it just messes with my head. So if I have an issue, I can't, I don't know. I just can't do it.
Yeah.
So if I have an issue with somebody, and it took me a really long time to, to get here. I've been called all kinds of things. You're too sensitive, blah, blah, blah. I don't even care anymore.
Right. Yeah. That's reflecting.
Yeah. When you start name calling, that's another kind of
okay. You're not taking responsibility.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that's neither here nor there. So that part, you can call me sensitive till I'm blue in the face. It doesn't matter. I don't care. Right. But if I have an issue with somebody or I take, offense to something that someone does, because it's important for me to have a clean mind and a clean heart. And when I say happy Sabbath, I really mean happy Sabbath.
Yes.
Like, I'm not going to be, I don't know how to like dodge people and act like it's too much mental gymnastics.
Yeah. The authenticity is there.
I just can't do it. So, I'm quick to speak to people and be like, hey, this happened. I just want to make sure, things are okay, and there are times, thankfully it hasn't happened that often to me because I usually come with, like, well, this happened and why, can you help me understand? I just want to be in a good space with you. For me, the goal of having a conversation with somebody is to just get on a good footing, right? We don't have to be best friends. I don't need for you to be, at my house and me, I don't need all that. You know what I mean? I just want us to be able to coexist and to be
and communicate as human beings.
Yeah. Exactly. That is so important to me. So I'll speak to you and even if you don't see him, okay, you know what? How can we move forward? But there are those rare instances where you point something out and the person says, what are you talking about?
And they well know what you're talking about.
I'm like, we're doing this is what we're doing today. Like, we're gonna be doing this. Okay. And when that happens, honestly, we need to help people understand that some folks are just not willing to take accountability. And some folks have not really they haven't really learned how to take ownership and be okay with being called out. That's another thing that I'm realizing about church folks. They do not like to be called out. And called out to me is not like to embarrass you, but it's to say, look, you did this and you need to be held account. And if I did it, please hold me accountable.
And I'm glad you said it, because one of the things I like to practice is like, if you say to me that, hey, Pastor, so I said, wow, didn't know that. Oh, I'm sorry. I have no problem to saying sorry. I learned a long time ago that sometimes you may even take the L. Take the loss.
Sometimes you just have to be like, you know what? I didn't see it that way. I really didn't.
Take the L.
You know what? I am so sorry that you felt,
take the loss.
That I did this to you. Yes.
But I think it takes a mature person and it takes an effective leader to take responsibility for their team, whether or not they themselves did the infraction or the team did the infraction. That's a great leader. We read about these guys like Alexander the Great, Attila the Hun, all these men, and there have been ladies also that find themselves in a leadership role and say, oh, I would love to be like Alexander the Great. Well, he went on the field and fight with his folks and he got cut and that's what it means. And it means that when he lost a war, he took full responsibility of the war. He did not blame his men about his loss. And that's one of the areas in leadership and spiritually. Jesus Christ, if I may take a moment to say, God created us in the Garden of Eden in the form of Adam and Eve. We're the ones sin. We're the ones sin. God could have said, okay, you know what? Boom. You sin. I said you're going to die. Boom, you're dead. Bam. But what he did, he killed an animal to take on our sin at that particular point. So we eventually died, but the animal had to die at the moment for the sin. Then he even said to us, I'm going to prepare a way out of the sin that you committed, which I'm going to send my son. That is proper stewardship. That is proper planning. And God himself took it upon himself in the form of man, Jesus Christ, our sins, to allow us to be forgiven. That's leadership. But many of us refuse to take upon themselves
Mhm.
in a leadership, the responsibility of
Mhm.
their members or responsibility of their family in the sense of family structure, and said, hey, I am the dad of the home. And that's why I'm so hard on dads.
Yes.
Very, very hard on dads. You know,
Yes.
oh, my wife did this. Just like Adam. Oh, Eve did this.
Yeah.
Man start to blame his wife, just look at Adam. Because God has placed you as the man of the house, and I'm not even trying to come with this new current era about joint leadership in the home and all that. To me, that is just a not biblical. I was going to use another word. Okay, the man is responsible in the home. Your kid misbehave is the father. The wife needs issues are it. You are ultimately responsible, and so we have these mamby-pamby men. Said it. That eyes behind the skirt of their wives and blame wives, kids for their own shortcoming.
Yeah.
And so we take that same behavior even into the church setting.
Yeah. And I think also, the Bible says pride goes before the fall. I think sometimes this ego, because you see this with men and the lack of leadership, right? And there's an order to how things are supposed to be in church and the way God set it up. But even other people in the church, women, just the lack of accountability, lack of being able to take ownership, that stems from, in my opinion, I could be wrong. I think it probably stems from fear too, but also from pride and ego. Like, just let the stuff go, guys.
Let it go.
Let it go. And the other thing too is, I think some people also, when spiritual trauma happens, I hope I'm not going too far off, but when spiritual trauma happens and people retreat, oftentimes, I know this happened to me, and even now I'm still a little bit leery about wanting to serve in the capacity that I know that I could serve, because I don't do well with toxicity. Because you see what I'm saying? And the church becomes a place where it's not safe, it's toxic, and you want to be able to serve, but because you know that people aren't going to take responsibility, aren't going to do the things, you're like, you know what? I'm just gonna.
Well, one of the things, stepping away from the church is not necessarily protest.
It's not.
But it's self-preservation.
It's self-preservation.
I like to talk about self-preservation because at the end of the day, you must preserve self.
We're talking about well-being.
Yeah.
Right? Emotional, physical, psychological, spiritual well-being. You
well, tell me, Doc, when you're diagnosing someone and you feel they get that trauma, do you tell the person try to go back into situations of trauma?
No, you do not.
Does the medical world say that?
We do not do that. I don't know why we think it's okay to do that in the church, but we do not do that in the medical space. Yeah, you have
you got to go back to that particular one and try to work it out. Work on what? Move on.
No, move on.
That might not be the environment for you.
Absolutely.
So when faith space become unsafe, withdrawal become a rational response. And there's nothing wrong with that.
And people will think that there's something wrong with it because you're led to believe that you withdrawing somehow means that you don't have enough faith, or maybe you're not strong enough, you're too sensitive, all the things that I've heard.
Right.
But I laugh now because it's like, okay, but you're
talking about a church respond with judgment on you. Boom.
All of that, and it's like, but that doesn't mean that. It just means you need to preserve self.
Right.
Yeah.
So they respond with judgment rather than restoration.
Absolutely.
Whereas we were leading a couple of weeks from now. This is how you restore someone. Although restoration is in God, God can work with us in the process of restoring someone.
Yeah.
But if we don't address our issues and keep judging or condemning, I would say, one of the other thing we like to do is it's like a sandbox. I call it the sandbox experience, because you were defeated in a situation, you can't play in my sandbox anymore. That's trauma.
That is trauma.
Who give you authority over the church to say you can't do this in the choir, you can't do this in the choir, just because you and I fall out. So you jockey for positions just to get back at someone.
Right.
And you're up there thinking you are, the best things in sliced bread. and the person feels very small sitting there. And then you and your team is requiring that they attend the attendance because you want a lot of people to come and see you perform.
Okay. Silent. I'm going to be silent.
Spiritual trauma.
Spiritual trauma.
Yeah. Give that individual some room. And so I go back to the framework as we close off in the last couple of minutes, where the church was never meant to be a place of extraction, control, or spiritual consumption. That was not the role of the church. It was designed to be a stewarded community that gives more than it takes. It protects more than it exposes.
Yes.
And it restores more than it discards. Jesus defined his mission very clearly, and we sometimes forget it. Luke 19:10 says, the Son of Man has come to seek and save the lost. What a beauty the church becomes like that. Seeking and saving the lost. Stewardship of soul was central in his work. Christ was looking for the soul of man.
Yeah. Yeah. If we could all just remember that, like, as we're serving, as we're in church, as we're doing, like, we need to go back to that. That is the point of it all.
Yes.
That is the point of it all.
Yeah. Yeah. And we will, I believe we will minimize trauma. So Doc, as we close off in the last 2 minutes, I'm going to ask you to do a summary for us tonight. I know we said a lot, and then I'm just going to do my closing remark. And I just love how you tie the medical piece into this. It's just, I'm not again, as I said earlier in tonight's broadcast, I'm not a medicine person. I'm not a medical doctor, no way. But I spoke from the perspective of how I felt with trauma. So please go ahead, Doc.
Yeah, I think that we need to remember that trauma, in whatever capacity, in whatever space we find it, is very damaging. And in this case, we're talking about spiritual trauma in the church and what we can do to release ourselves from the burden, but also what we can do to, to reduce the negative impact that it is having on people around us. And again, like, I want to go back to this very statement that you made, Dr. White, and that is that spiritual trauma starts where stewardship ends. So we need to really remember that stewardship is what God has called us to. And when we can effectively steward people, then we can effectively deal with this issue of spiritual trauma, and naming that thing. We never got to like diving too deep into that, but being okay with naming the trauma, the wound, will be the first step in helping you to heal.
Thank you so much, Dr. Williams. And that naming, I'm going to promise our viewers that we're going to go into that in the next episode. How do you name the hurt? And you mentioned you were talking about something so profound. I kind of did a quick summary when you were saying you're trying to explain to someone or trying to find the words to bring across so you actually feel. And sometimes it's very difficult. And that is where in this world, we have the psychologists that will talk and help you, and the counselor to identify that word. What are you actually talking about? What are you actually feeling? And again, I believe the church needs to be positioned actively in doing that, and also be confidential. So part 2 to this is that. How does a church do that and be confidential? So when you walk into church this next following Sabbath or Sunday, a person that used to look at you and said, hi, they're like,
yeah, because now all of a sudden they have information about you that they weren't supposed to have. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That is spiritual trauma.
That's it.
So thank you everyone again for being on tonight. And we look forward. Please add your comments throughout the week. We will be very happy to hear what they are as we flush out or dissect this whole concept of, and of course, if you have had spiritual trauma within your church setting, and we're not talking about just one denomination, we're talking about across the denomination. Real Talk with Dr. White is not denominational specific. I'll repeat that. We're not denominational specific. We're about the church of God, meaning God's people out there in all different denominations, because Christ came to heal everyone. He came to serve everyone. And so that's a model we want to follow. So wherever church you're from, whatever denomination you're from, we'd like to hear your comment on this particular topic. Share your story. Be with us. And again, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure. to be able to dissect this topic. My book will be coming out in a couple of months. It will go, you'll hear more real life issues and how we, is a 3-part approach of how we address these things and have your church prepared to get out of it. Have a great night and may God bless you. Bye-bye now.